Greetings from Tokyo, my dear friends. This is Daisuke, and I very much hope that this video finds you well and in very good spirits wherever you are in the world. And if you don't mind, I would very much like to continue, or shall I say begin, our journey, our discoveries, our discussions, and our explorations, and indeed our adventures with respect to the recent releases made by the Criterion Collection during this year of 2023. My goodness, time certainly flies, does it not? And with that, we have a whole bunch of new Criterion releases this year, such as this title, which has been designated by Criterion at spy number 1166. This is a work which is described as being from the year 1988. And the name of the filmmaker is Terry Gilliam. And the name of the film is The Adventures of Baron Munchausen. My dear friends, thank you very much for joining me. And before I continue, I should say that, as you may see from the setup that I have here, I am trying out new equipment. I'm trying to change things up just slightly with respect to the video making and the sound recording and the microphones, etc. And so a lot of this is trial and error on my part. I'm also very inexperienced and very unskilled when it comes to creating videos. And so I very much will make a number of mistakes, and I will try to correct them. But in the meantime, I ask for your patience and also your support as I'm trying out new things and trying to, as I say, continue on with this YouTube channel as much as I can, while trying to upgrade and trying to improve upon, say, recording equipment and video making equipment and skills, etc. So thank you very much, as always, for your kindness, friendship, and support in the past. And I look forward to our continuing conversations and discussions about this film and indeed many other film going forward. My dear friends, thank you so much. And also, I should say too that this discussion, I know my discussions can get a little bit long sometimes, so I apologize for that. But if you want to jump forward or backwards in terms of a specific point in the video itself, I will try to provide timestamps, and those should be found in the description box of this YouTube video. So if you want to jump forward to a specific discussion point, please check the timestamps, and you can click on those, and that should bring you anywhere you want over the course of this video discussion, just in case you want to skip ahead to something specific. You can always check the timestamps in the description box below, my dear friends. This is the work from the year 1988, and the filmmaker, the director, is Terry Gilliam, and this is from a screenplay by Terry Gilliam and Charles McEwen, and it is a very intriguing, engaging, very complex spectacle for the senses. It is a feast for the eyes, the ears, and indeed the overall cinematic senses. There is so much happening in front of the camera and indeed behind the camera. So much complexity, so much nuance, and so much, one can say, creative chaos and artistic abandon, and a type of unyielding spirit and drive forward, no matter what the costs, in a manner of speaking, to present this tale in cinematic form that has among its really wonderful cast people like John Neville and Sarah Polley and Eric Idle and Uma Thurman and Oliver Reed and others, and so many others. And part of the fun is indeed the cast that make up the characters that inhabit this world of this work of art, this cinematic work, again from the director Terry Gilliam. It is this film, The Adventures of Baron Munchausen. Before I get into any, well, let's say we can talk about this Criterion release, and we will talk a little bit later about the Criterion release supplements, and what I have here is the 4K UHD plus Blu-ray combo. It is totaling 3 discs. the 4K UHD disc, and then 2 Blu-ray discs. And so we will have the opportunity perhaps a little bit later in this video discussion to talk about what we can find on each of these discs respectively. And there is a lot to talk about. This is a really wonderful Criterion release. But before we get into discussions about the specific, say, supplements, etc., let us first talk about the film itself. And if we were to try, my dear friends, to describe this incredible, frenzied, zany, entertaining work of art, I think we could focus in on this character, Baron Munchausen. This is the John Neville character, who seems to, almost from the outset, again, set forth against the backdrop of what's known as the Age of Reason. And here we have the Age of Reason set forth against some kind of political or military intrigue, and indeed danger and risk in terms of attacks and assaults and explosions, and danger to life and limb, as it were. While all of this is happening, of course, we have the notion of the art and the theater, and indeed part of that notion of the art and the theater and the spectacle and the drama and the stage and the theater, we have part of this too is the setting up of the dynamic of storytelling. Specifically at the center of the storytelling aspect is the story or stories of Baron Munchausen. And we see from the very beginning a type of, say, a theatrical setup involving the stories, or the attempt of a theater troupe to try to set forth the stories of Baron Munchausen in costume, in staging, in certain, say, theatrical techniques and tricks, etc. But lo and behold, what we also see very early on is the emergence of a character that claims to be the true-to-life, the actual Baron Munchausen. This is John Neville's character. A fascinating performance. And here we get the blending of what one might call, quote-unquote, reality and fantasy, because we see this charismatic, this enigmatic, and in many ways over-the-top, full of life, full of zest, and full of vigor figure that is Baron Munchausen, and we see him trying to engage with the members of this acting troupe, also in the context of the military plight that seems to be going on around them. Whether he is conscious of this or oblivious of this is part of the levels in which this film operates in terms of quote-unquote reality and then quote-unquote fantasy. And then also we have the engagement of Baron Munchausen in terms of storytelling, in terms of things that happened to him in the past, and also the idea of setting up the legend and lore, and the characterizations of Baron Munchausen, both in terms of the theatrical storytelling and then also in the cinematic mode too, because we see as part of the proceedings of this cinematic work, The Adventures of Baron Munchausen, just how he is then set off on a number of, say, adventures that take him throughout all all parts of, say, the elements. And we see him, say, in water, in sand, in fire, and indeed in space and the moon even. And so he is traveling, in a sense, around the world and indeed beyond, into space and beyond. And so we have, therefore, the element or the aspect or the setting up of the, shall we say, the fantastic or the fantasy storytelling, the episodic adventures, almost in a serial nature, that are also very, very zany, very buoyant, and very filled with a lot of charm and a lot of, say, extraordinary feats, and also a lot of this wonderfully handmade quality of cinematic storytelling, whether it involves the way in which special effects are engaged and embedded into the film and have a type of theatricality quality to it that is very charming, very direct, that is almost, in a way, calling attention to the fact that they're wonderfully artistically rendered and constructed set pieces, whether it involves, say, puppet work, or whether it involves animation work, or whether it involves the aspect of setting up model work and design, and the elements and compositions and superimpositions that involve each of these various, say, portions of cinema and cinema storytelling that come together and blend in a way in the hands of Terry Gilliam and company that really make the myth and the legend and the fantasy and the adventure of Baron Munchausen and company come to life in this springy and zest-filled and an effervescent way that is utterly charming, that is also, I think, wonderfully paced in terms of this, as I say, episodic nature of the film. And we meet various characters, both throughout the world and on land, on sea, in space, and beyond. And we see their larger-than-life aspects. We see the wonderful characterizations and a circle of, say, friends and associates that surround Baron Munchausen. Maybe special note could be made for people like Eric Idle and indeed also Sarah Polley. And Sarah Polley's character, plays the young girl as part of the, say, one of the companions, if you will, along the ride for these adventures of Baron Munchausen. Not only the companion for the adventurers, but also a companion to us, the viewers, because her presence in the film also gives us a sense of the almost childlike wonder that we as viewers can also have in viewing and experiencing and living these adventures as they are playing out before our very eyes as we watch this film, The Adventures of Baron Munchausen. And so much zany, zest-filled experiences await, because we have these wonderful special effects set pieces, this great way in which music and time and composition and special effects and wonderful creative storytelling come together in these, as I say, episodic set pieces that really drive the story along to its wonderful, say, conclusion or, say, cinematic beats that really have this wonderful set of pacing. This is the work, The Adventures of Baron Munchausen, and indeed it also grasps or encompasses a truly one-of-a-kind, unique cinematic visual style and flair that, again, I think is associated very, very, very appropriately and indeed very deservedly so to Terry Gilliam. His eye and his vision and his almost the boundless nature of his creative talents, I think, are really on display in this work, The Adventures of Baron Munchausen, so much so that it's regarded as one of his most emblematic and most creative adventures. And that's saying a lot in the context of the filmography of Terry Gilliam, as we know, whose films are indeed so creative and so individualized and so filled with spirit, each and every one of them. And this film, The Adventures of Baron Munchausen, is another great example of that wonderful filmmaking style and technique. And also, we will get into this a little bit later with the supplements discussion, but as some of you may know, there's also this legend that has built up around this work, the film, The Adventures of Baron Munchausen. Because of the production history of this film, there was a lot of production history. There were a lot of stories, there were a lot of details that many people have expressed in terms of the chaos and in terms of the almost the unyielding nature of the story itself. So much so that perhaps it went maybe in a way that was almost overly chaotic. And we get a sense of this in some of the interviews that we will see in the supplement section. And so, but right now, let me say that it is indeed an example of a film that could be said to be artistic and cinematic chaos, all rolled into one. This artistic and cinematic chaos can be said to be expressed in such a vivid and entertaining way in front of the camera, and also it could be said to be expressed in these very, very compelling and quite intriguing behind-the-scenes production stories behind the camera. And so this is a multifaceted work in terms of consideration in many, say, senses of that phrase. And so in that way and many others, I think this work, The Adventures of Baron Munchausen, is one to watch. This is a very, very entertaining work. It is so filled with heart, and it's filled with a depth, and it's filled with such a boundless creativity, and also the stories associated with in terms of the production, etc., and the genesis of the film, and the aftermath of the film, and indeed the pre-production, production, and post-production of this film. They all set forth a really rich and engrossing palette of cinematic expression and creativity and production and filmmaking that could have gone awry and that could have gone off the rails and could have exploded in terms of creative chaos in a way that could have been disastrous. And indeed, perhaps to some people, this could be said to be a type of production disaster. And we'll get to those details as well when we talk of the supplements. But that, in turn, makes for some really fascinating considerations and explorations indeed. So we get a full meal when we talk about this film, The Adventures of Baron Munchausen. We get a full-bodied consideration of this work of art, not just what we see in front of the screen, which is brilliant, but also behind the screen, which also gives us so much to think about and consider and talk about in terms of the context of the actual art of filmmaking itself. And my goodness, what a treat that is indeed when you're talking about this film, as again released by the Criterion Collection this year. And what a release this is. This is the work which is The Adventures of Baron Munchausen. The Criterion Collection has released this film, The Adventures of Baron Munchausen, on this 4K UHD plus Blu-ray combo edition, and this therefore has 3 discs. There is the 4K UHD disc, which has the film plus the commentary track, and we'll talk about that momentarily. And then we have the Blu-ray disc number 1, which also has the film and also the commentary track option. And then Blu-ray disc number 2, which has the special features associated with the Criterion release of The Adventures of Baron Munchausen. So overall, we have 3 discs, and it is a packed release, and so much going for this. This is such a wonderful release in so many ways, and I look forward to talking with you a little bit about the supplements later in this video. But first, let's talk about the restoration itself. I've taken the liberty of removing the leaflet or the foldout, which is part of the Criterion release, because I wanted to, at this point in time, talk about the restoration as it's stated here. And I quote, "About the restoration, The Adventures of Baron Munchausen is presented in its original aspect ratio of 1.85 to 1. It was restored in 4K resolution by Sony Pictures Entertainment. The 4K wet gate scan of the 35mm original camera negative was done by Cinerec Inc. in New York. Digital image restoration was done by Prasad in Burbank, California. Color grading was done in HDR, high dynamic range, by Sherry Eisenberg at Roundabout Entertainment in Santa Monica, California. Audio restoration and conform of the 5.1 surround soundtrack, which was upmixed in 2004, was done by Deluxe Audio in Hollywood. The restoration was supervised by Grover Crisp for Sony Pictures Entertainment, with color approval by director Terry Gilliam. On the 4K Ultra HD disc, the feature is presented in Dolby Vision HDR. On the Blu-ray, it is presented in High Definition SDR, Standard Dynamic Range." So, end quote. And so that is the note about the restoration, which is found in the Criterion leaflet that accompanies this release of The Adventures of Baron Munchausen by Criterion. And I must say, based on my own personal experience with the film, so I have seen the film a number of times in the past, and I have enjoyed it every single time. But I must say that given all those experiences that I have with the film, I must say that this 4K restoration, and for me too, the 4K UHD disc, is simply put, utterly sublime. I thought this was really, really great. There is a way in which, for instance, when I view the film and when I subjectively experience the film, from my point of view, I always find, for example, that in addition to the integrities of the colors and the contrasts and the contours of this wonderfully rendered color palette that is part of the many worlds of The Adventures of Baron Munchausen, what I also find very important for my viewing experience is also looking at, say, the spectacle of the effects, and also at the same time feeling the handmade quality of the puppetry and the model work and the design. This is so important because part of the charm of this film is that handmade quality. because it makes it more accessible from a viewership perspective, at least from my viewership perspective anyway. And so that means to seeing almost the wires, or seeing the cracks, or seeing the peels, or seeing the little rips and tears. This is part of the artistic design. And I must say that all of those details combined, and all this information that happens almost at this high-paced, frenzied way, I think is preserved with such majesty and such delight in the 4K restoration, and indeed in particular in the 4K UHD disc. And also the sound too. The sound is so immersive and so all-encompassing, and so many things, so much information happens on the soundtrack as well. And so this too, I feel, is preserved and indeed enhanced when I watch the film and experience the film in the 4K UHD disc. That's part of the Criterion collection here. So I thought it was terrific. Really terrific. Now, I also saw the film on the Blu-ray disc. That's Blu-ray disc number 1. And I, too, found that experience to be so sublime. It was really wonderful. I could note very little perceptible, say, sonic or visual differences, apart from, say, the slight differences that occur naturally between the change of formats. So the Blu-ray viewing experience was also very, very fun for me, and very immersive, and so thoroughly entertaining, to the point where I can say that I think you will have a good time with this film, either with the 4K UHD disc experience or the Blu-ray disc experience, whatever you prefer, my dear friends. So in any event, I found this to be so wonderful, so charming, and what a presentation experience this is from Criterion. I thought it was great. And also, I should point out while I'm here that there's also the Laserdisc here, which is The Adventures of Baron Munchausen Laserdisc, which I'm holding right now. And so this used to be at Criterion Laserdisc spine number 144. But it is now time to say that we have this film once again emerging in the Criterion collection with this 4K UHD plus Blu-ray combo at spine number 1166. So it is great to say that this returns to the Criterion collection in earnest. I'm very, very happy about this indeed. So this is yet another, I think, cause for celebration when it comes to this release, not only in terms of the excellence and quality of the 4K restoration as it appears on the Blu-ray and the 4K UHD disc, but also a return of a title that used to be in the Laserdisc collection, now in this wonderful rendition, a wonderfully rendered release from Criterion of The Adventures of Baron Munchausen. Let us turn our attention to the supplements that can be found together with this wonderful release, The Adventures of Baron Munchausen from the Criterion collection. And I think we can turn our attention first to the audio commentary track, which can be found as an option, an audio option accompanying the feature film itself. So once again, as we recall, the feature film is included on the 4K UHD disc and on Blu-ray disc number 1. So for either of these options, you can also choose to watch the film while listening in to the audio commentary track, and it is a really great one. This is an audio commentary track with Terry Gilliam and Charles McEwen. It's described as being from the year 2008. And it's one of the commentary tracks where they are sitting together and talking, and they have a nice banter and repartee, and they have a wonderful, alignment about the production, the genesis of making the story itself, and some of the production details. This was a production that was done in Italy, as we know. There were a lot of complexities and perhaps turmoil that accompany the production, and so they do touch upon some of these details. For instance, some of the actors they mentioned were very unhappy, and they made vocal such unhappiness. While at the same time, however, in this commentary track, and that's one of the nice things about it, I would say, is it also focuses in on a lot of the positive aspects of the production, some of the casting choices that were made, some of the special effects choices that were made, some of the allusions and references and homages. There are some wonderful anecdotes. For instance, there's a lovely anecdote that Terry Gilliam makes about Federico Fellini, and it reminds us too about a lot of Gilliam's works, including this work, The Adventures of Baron Munchausen, could be said to have a lot of, say, Fellini types of aspects to the artwork and the artistry. So it's a lovely anecdote to have, and those sorts of maybe pleasant and positive anecdotes, and sometimes sometimes maybe be not as emphasized as some of the more chaotic turmoil aspects of the production. And believe me, there are those aspects of the turmoil which will be focused on, I think, in some other supplements that can be found with this Criterion release. But for now, we have what one might call, for lack of a better phrase, a kind of positive outlook glow. It's still very earnest, still very honest, because it's coming from two direct participants of the film. The writers and the director, and one of the people who Charles McEwan does feature as one of the cast members as well. So I think it has that great combination of a certain perspective on looking back on the production. And there are some interesting details about the location shooting. There's an interesting detail about how this could be said to be like a children's fantasy film because of the presence of the Sarah Polley character as an example and the like. And so and some of the budget cuts are mentioned, as well as some of the very famous sequences, the moon sequences mentioned here, etc. So all in all, this is a wonderful commentary track. I'm glad it's included as part of the Criterion release. While it's not necessarily a 2022 or 2023 produced Criterion supplement or commentary track, it's still great to have. It's always great to have commentary tracks, and this one is no exception to that. This is wonderful to have. If you haven't already done so, please watch the film while listening into this great commentary track. It's going to be a very fun time indeed. But now let us turn to the other supplements that can be found included with this Criterion release of The Adventures of Baron Munchausen. So this time, let us turn our attention to Blu-ray Disc number 2. So once again, as we know from the 4K UHD releases from Criterion, the supplements will be found not on the 4K UHD disc, but rather on the Blu-ray disc. And further, with respect to this release, Adventures of Baron Munchausen, since we have two Blu-ray discs, Blu-ray disc number 1 will have the film with the option of the commentary track. Blu-ray disc number 2 will have the supplements, the special features, the extras, and that is where we will draw our attention right now. Let us devote our attention to such Blu-ray disc number 2, the supplements. And so what do we have with regard to the supplements? And I should say, too, some of these supplements could be said to have been found in previous non-Criterion releases, so they can be considered to be carryovers from such previous releases, but that's really great. And two, in addition to those, we have newly produced Criterion-produced supplements, which you also speak about here. Overall, it's a wonderful, packed set of supplements. It's really great. It's on its own Blu-ray disc. And so that should indicate to you just how much you're getting here. So you're really getting a lot. And one of the great things about Criterion releases, as well as any other physical media release for that matter from any other label, is the wealth of possibility when you have a lot of supplements included with the release. And here is a great example of this, my dear friends. To start the new year, 2023, The Adventures of Baron Munchausen, Criterion Collection on Blu-ray disc number 2. What a package this is. And so what do we have? First up, we have it's the making of documentary. It's a very famous one. It's a 3-part documentary described as being from the year 2008, The Madness and Misadventures of Munchausen. And we have 3 parts. The first is Flights of Fancy, which is approximately 29 minutes. Next is Caught in the Act, approximately 16 minutes. And last is The Final Curtain, approximately 25 minutes. So once again, these 3 parts make up the overall documentary, which is The Madness and Misadventures of Munchausen. This is really, really great. I think it's one of the great making of documentaries from, say, the early release of this film. And so if you haven't had a chance to watch this, now is your chance. It's just really great. Now, as I mentioned before, there's a lot of detail, a lot of machinations, a lot of quote-unquote political intrigue, end quote, because there's a lot of producers who were included but then dropped out. There are a lot of names, a lot of people who might have been involved but then dropped out. There's a lot of backstage intrigue, as it were. And indeed, this documentary sets the stage, I think, very nicely, very honestly, and gives so much room for a number of the participants and the interview participants to really say what it is they really feel about this. For example, I mentioned earlier about Sarah Polley, the great Sarah Polley, and how she has this key role in this film, The Adventures of Baron Munchausen, but also she is on record as having voiced her, say, dismay over some of the aspects, or perhaps many of the aspects of the production of The Adventures of Baron Munchausen. Well, here she's included as one of the interview participants. And on the one hand, she gives, I think, a very well-balanced and quite an honest assessment as to her participation, the details surrounding how she ended up with the role. And it's a really, I think, very earnest and honest comment on that. And then she does go into some details about how she was very unhappy with certain aspects of the production, and when there was a break from production due to certain difficulties with the studios and the finance and the going over budget, etc. Then she mentions how she was so happy to go home for a little bit of a vacation from the production shoot. And so that's an indication of how she was maybe not so happy with some of the production details. Also, similarly to Eric Idle, who also plays a key role in this film. Listen to his comments. They are really great. On the one hand, he expresses, of course, admiration and respect for the genius that is Terry Gilliam and his image and his vision and the images that he was able to conjure up on screen for this and other films. At the same time, Eric Idle is in his wonderful Eric Idle funny way. He mentions his displeasure, his unhappiness with certain aspects of the production shoot as well. So those are really funny, witty, acerbic moments that are also compounded by some of the details, as I say, about the finances, about the accounting, and about certain instances involving how these accounting details led to clashes, some real direct clashes between the powers that be, the studios side on the one hand and the creative side, in particular Terry Gilliam on the other. And so this is a document that's setting a stage for that and really showing us the outgrowth and the results of that. And Terry Gilliam, I think, to his credit, does acknowledge a certain sense of, say, chaotic creative whimsy. That on the one hand might have resulted in a lot of clashes, perhaps that could have been avoided, and that perhaps led to some real, maybe irreparably damaged human relations, as it were. But on the other hand, it does show on screen, and the fact that the film is a creative, I think, such a creative film, and the end result is so amazing, I think is a testament to the fact of just how well things were able to be contained. Or perhaps it was a little bit of luck, or perhaps it was all luck. Who knows? It's up to you to decide when you watch this making of documentary and also do the research in terms of the making of and the production of this film, The Adventures of Baron Munchausen. So it gives you the opportunity, my dear friends, to make up your own mind as to how to assess this film from the vantage point of, say, the creative genius at work when one is realizes, when it reminds, or one is reminded of just how chaotic and just how unpleasant in many aspects the production was. And maybe it wasn't the fault of this person or that person or the other person. Maybe it was a sense of miscommunication. Maybe it was a sense of trying to do too much at once. Maybe it was a sense of just not thinking through certain things. And there are some aspects where Terry Gilliam does admit certain details, like he mentions too about shooting or having a shoot during the daytime versus the nighttime, and it was due to a reason that he acknowledges he could have fixed himself, but it had to do with the open top of the roof and the heat that would occur during the climate in Italy, which caused for night shoots to be emphasized at the start of the shooting schedule, which probably was somewhat of a portentous thing according to some of the interview participants. But in any event, these and other reasons, I think, stand for why this documentary needs to be seen. It is so wonderful and great. And indeed, as I mentioned earlier, I think one can look at this film, The Adventures of Baron Munchausen, as being a type of two-sided coin. I mean, all coins are two-sided, I suppose, but here is an example of such coin, which is two-sided. One side being the film itself, the other side, of course, being the production. And as I mentioned earlier, I think the production complexities are themselves something to consider when examining and exploring this film, The Adventures of Baron Munchausen. And what a great place to go this documentary is, coinciding with or alongside the the commentary track from Charles McEwen and Terry Gilliam, which I mentioned earlier, that forms a nice unit, a nice, I think, cohesive whole in trying to at least have certain jumping off points or certain places to have further explorations and further journeys with regard to the production history of this film, The Adventures of Baron Munchausen. So this documentary, the three-parted aspect of this documentary is so great. The Madness and Misadventures of Munchausen. Please check it out if you can. But that's not all, because second we have a section which is labeled Special Effects, and this is narrated by Terry Gilliam, and this is approximately 16 minutes, and this is described as being from the year 2022. So this is really nice indeed. Terry Gilliam here talks about certain sequences and certain aspects of the special effects the special effects aspects of the construction of some of these sequences. And so we see a lot of layering, a lot of details, a lot of reasons for why certain components were constructed the way they were, what was the makeup of certain components. This part was made out of this in the studio. This part of the screen was made, was a kind of composite. This was made through a different aspect and combined together. You know, that type of discussion. And so we have, for example, discussions about the vortex scene. I don't want to go into too much detail, again, for those who have yet to see the film, but some details about the vortex scene, some moon sequence scenes, model work and puppetry work, etc. And as I mentioned earlier, this film has so much of a beautiful, intricate, handmade quality about it, and it's done on purpose. And this is one of the beautiful things about this film, how it shows us the handcrafted nature of the construction of this work of art. And it also, therefore, respects that type of art creation because it calls attention to it in this loving way. And indeed, the special effects don't try to hide that, but rather they show it and they celebrate it in this wonderful cinematic way. And we have further discussions of the special effects in this 2022 feature. So the special effects section, approximately 16 minutes. This is well worth checking out. Please do so if you have the opportunity. Next up, the third supplement here is called Deleted Scenes, and these are 4 scenes with optional audio commentary track for each. So we have. Let's see. There's a gull and turkey leg, an alternate opening sequence, which is approximately 1 minute. Second is Mutiny on Stage. It's approximately 57 seconds. Next is Rules of Warfare, approximately 51 seconds. And next is Extended Fish Sequence, approximately 56 seconds. And as I say, it has an optional commentary track from Terry Gilliam, and he describes what the scenes are, and perhaps sometimes, or he describes the reasons why they were excised, removed, etc. So it's another great example of the almost voluminous, or reminder of the voluminous aspect of the production of this film, Baron Munchausen, or The Adventures of Baron Munchausen, excuse me. So please check out the deleted scenes if you can. Next up, the fourth supplement here is called Storyboards for Unfilmed Scenes. And this is Terry Gilliam with Charles McEwen. And we have an introduction with the two of them, which is also showcasing their wonderful banter, repartee, and acerbic wit that they both share. And then it goes into certain sequences. The Baron saves Sally, approximately 2 minutes. A Voyage to the Moon, approximately 21 minutes. And the Baron and Cephalus charge the Turkish gates, approximately 4 minutes. And here we have the scenes or the shots of the storyboards together with voiceover narration describing the scenes as we see them play themselves out, or the sequences as we see them play themselves out, because as we know, especially with the Voyage to the Moon section, this is actually made up of a number of scenes. So we have many scenes within this section or the sequence, each of these showcasing primarily the unfilmed portions with the voiceover narration, and but sometimes we have linking material that is from the film itself. So sometimes we'll see, therefore, or we can imagine how these scenes, had they been shot, how they could have been integrated into the final product proper. But for the most part, we are getting the unfilmed scenes in the storyboard a photo montage type of display. And it's really cool, really clever, and it's a lovely further indication and reminder of just how voluminous, how far-reaching the initial vision was and what could have been. What we get in terms of the final product is really wonderful in my view, but again, it's one of those great what-if questions that we get reminded of, especially when we watch the storyboard section. So the storyboards for unfilmed scenes, this is a great section indeed. Please check it out if you can. And that's not all, because next we have a section which is called Marketing Munchausen, and this is made up of a number of subsections. First up is preview cards. This is approximately 11 minutes, and this is Terry Gilliam reading from the preview cards that were filled out by participants who attended preview screenings of the film, The Adventures of Baron Munchausen. And I must say that Terry Gilliam has this, as I mentioned before, acerbic wit. And he has this wonderful way of voicing displeasure. And I mean that in a complimentary way. And he does it in this funny, witty, ironic way. And it's showcased here to the max. In this way, he's reading the preview cards, and sometimes the preview cards aren't so complimentary to the film, or maybe they're focusing on certain aspects of the film that maybe he would rather perhaps not focus on, or vice versa. So it's interesting to see his reaction and how he reads the words off the cards as he's showing them to us. So this is another great showcase. Again, Terry Gilliam is a very, very fascinating person. And so part of that fascination, I think, has to do with his humor and his wit, and it shines through here in that so Terry Gilliam way here with the preview cards. So that's the first section, approximately 11 minutes. And then that's not all, because then we have taglines, because, of course, Columbia Pictures wanted to create a number of taglines for the film in order to market the film and be part of, say, the poster art or the tagline that would be read in the trailer or something like that. And here, this is also from 2022. This is approximately 3 minutes. Here we have, once again, Terry Gilliam in that Terry Gilliam glory, reading out some of the taglines, and his reaction and response is so funny. This is so great. This is another gem. So please check this out if you can. Again, the taglines as read by Terry Gilliam here. And then we have a 4-minute, say, featurette, maybe a contemporary featurette called Meet Baron Munchausen. And here we have Terry Gilliam at the time talking directly to the camera about the film. And again, the same thing made, I think, around the time of the making of the film or the release of the film. And so here we have, there's no change. Terry Gilliam is Terry Gilliam here, and it's so wonderful. It's so sharp, and it has that vicious edge to it that is also very clever and very witty. So I love this. It's so great. So this is the Meet Baron Munchausen, a 4-minute featurette, which is then followed by a production featurette, which is also sort of making of, but from a featurette perspective, again, contemporary, I think, to the time, approximately 7 minutes. So this is also an interesting angle into how this was marketed, or how perhaps people are thinking about marketing this from the studio perspective. And then last but not least, we have the trailer, which rounds out this section. It's a great trailer, so please check this out as well. Once again, all these are under the overall banner of Marketing Munchausen in the main supplement section. That's not all, because the next up we have the astonishing and really true history of Baron Munchausen. This is described as being from 2022, and this is a video essay by David Cairns. This is wonderful because it's talking actually about the history of Baron Munchausen. And this is totaling 17 minutes, and it's talking about the history and adventures of the real-life Baron Munchausen, which then became the basis for the storytelling and the writings of Rudolf Erich Rasp. And then this, in turn, became the basis for a number of adaptations, some for radio, but then primarily, especially in the context of this discussion, in the context of film adaptations. And so we have some examples here that David Cairns mentions. For example, Méliès's vision of the stories of Baron Munchausen is mentioned and featured here too. It's very interesting. And then we have Joseph von Backy's version here from the early 40s during the time of Nazi Germany. And then also we have the discussion of Karel Zeman's work, the animation, or sort of a hybrid, if you will, a very, very clever use of design and sort of, again, the handcrafted feel that is very much Zeman, which also works that can be discussed, and Zeman's works can be found in the Criterion collection under separate great releases as well. But these are some examples of where the discussion by David Cairns is talking about here, and also to a lot of the focus on, for instance, the storytelling and some of the illustrations and drawings associated with Gustave Doré is mentioned as well here, a very key figure. And so overall, again, one of the important aspects of the film, The Adventures of Baron Munchausen, is Baron Munchausen himself, and also directly and indirectly in the film, embedded within it, we have the notion of storytelling, adaptations, legends, myths, theater, illustrations, animation, etc. And so we have almost this type of meta way in which the film operates to remind us of the storytelling of the tales of Baron Munchausen, which is, again, teetering on this lovely balancing act between quote-unquote reality and then quote-unquote fantasy or fiction. And this David Cairns video essay, again, reminds us about how that is actually inherent in the story and life and times of Baron Munchausen himself. So it's a great video essay. Please check it out if you can. Again, it's approximately 17 minutes. This is really wonderful. And then that's not all, because then we have the South Bank Show, a 1991 episode. This is Melvin Bragg, South Bank Show. And this is approximately 47 minutes. This is Terry Gilliam, or focus on Terry Gilliam. And it's kind of a sit-down, at-home interview, a very casual, very relaxed discussion with Terry Gilliam. And we see some scenes with him in the backyard playing with his children, and some scenes with his family, and also some shots or some excerpts or glimpses into his home or his and some of the things that are in his home, especially associated with some of the films that he's talking about. Now, this goes through his history from Terry Gilliam's point of view, and so it talks about his early days, his work as an in terms of animation and drawing and art, and then talks about Monty Python days, and then it talks about some of his film work. For example, Time Bandits, and then talking about Brazil, and then also talking about The Adventures of Baron Munchausen, of course. And then this is 1991, so it's also talking about the film The Fisher King to a certain degree. So we have, it's a great discussion with him. Also, Michael Palin is featured in a little bit of this show. So it's another indication of the sort of overarching work of Terry Gilliam, at least up to a certain point, the early 90s anyway, when the show was made. So, of course, Terry Gilliam made a number of films after this, but that notwithstanding, this focus in this show is really, really wonderful. It's a great primer into the world of Terry Gilliam, including the film The Adventures of Baron Munchausen, as well as getting a sense as to how it fits into an overall context that is the filmography of Terry Gilliam and his work and his vision and his art and his genius and his craft. So it's a great place to go. Again, if you're looking for more information about the artist, please check out the South Bank Show episode here. Again, approximately 47 minutes. And then we have the short film from 1974, Miracle of Flight. This is approximately 5 minutes. Terry Gilliam's short film. This is so great as well and it looks great. The quality, it looks wonderful. And it is an animation work. It focuses in on flight and certain episodic way. Again, very funny, has a sketch comedy aspect to it. It also focuses in on the aspect of flying. And as we know, flying is a very key detail in the film The Adventures of Baron Munchausen, and indeed in other films by Terry Gilliam. So this is a great place to go. Another short film. Please check this out if you can. It is approximately 5 minutes. And that rounds out the supplements that can be found on disc 2, Blu-ray disc number 2. And so it is a wonderful collection, packed. So you're getting your money's worth when you're talking about this release in the context of the supplements that are included. As I say, some supplements were carried over from previous releases, but we do have a number of supplements that were created, 2022 for purposes of this new 2023 release. So that is also very good, including, for instance, where Terry Gilliam is reading off some of the preview cards and part of the marketing materials, etc. So please check these and other supplements out if you can. It's really worth it. It's great release, great aspect of this release from the Criterion collection. And I should also talk about the insert here, which is I'm holding right now in my hand. And so it is one of the fold-out types. And so I'm not a fan of the fold-out type. And so I'd much rather have the staple booklet, because the staple booklet is really, really robust and has room for a number of writings here. But this is the fold-out type, but it's great for a number of reasons. One of which is it does include some aspects of the artwork, which does show up too in this cover art design, by the way, and I would be remiss if I didn't mention the cover art design. So let me now take the opportunity here. This cover art design is really fabulous. I really love this. The production credits indicate art director Sarah Habibi, Eric Skillman, illustration Abigail Giuseppe, and designers Raphael Gironi, Eric Skillman. And so I love this design. It has a wonderful handmade quality to it, ornate quality to it, which is so apropos the film. So please check out the cover art design, or when you go and you're looking through the sort of the shelves, or if you're in the Blu-ray store and you're looking at cover art designs, this is one this is eye-catching. So this is really great. And as I say, the cover art design aspects are carried over into the leaflet. Not only that, we have a wonderful essay. It's called A Reason to Believe by Michael Koresky, who is, I think, well known in Criterion circles. And here Michael Koresky emerges with this great, well-written, so accessible and wonderfully organized essay. He touches on all these points about the production history, about Baron Munchausen, the adaptations, the stories, some of the other film adaptations leading up to Terry Gilliam's work, some of the story elements, the themes, character beats, and the production details, some of the chaotic aspects of that as well. It is an overall package that's really wonderful, such a pleasant read. I love the Criterion releases, and indeed the other non-Criterion labels as well, when they have these essays, great essays like A Reason to Believe. So please check out the essay if you have the opportunity to, which is also, again, part of the overall package, which is this release of the Adventures of Baron Munchausen. And so with that, my dear friends, that, I think, concludes the comments that I wanted to make about this wonderful release from Criterion. This is the 4K UHD plus Blu-ray combo release of The Adventures of Baron Munchausen. I think it is a great example of the 4K format in the hands of Criterion. It has an overall aesthetic that is wonderful. It's a great start to the year 2023 and Criterion's lineup. And it is also, I think, a wonderful reminder of the work of Terry Gilliam and others. And also, it is a great film in terms of the intricate nature, the artistry, the special effects, the fantasy element, the entertainment value, as well as the behind-the-scenes production details, which is also an indication of how we can explore this work of cinema, both in front of the camera and behind the camera. And we're getting all of those included with this release, as well as a packed disc filled with special features, and also the inclusion of the commentary track. So overall, a great release, a great package from the Criterion collection. Well worth checking out if you haven't already. This is The Adventures of Baron Munchausen. All right, my dear friends, so that's it for now. And so until we meet again, please be happy and healthy and well. And please keep on watching a lot of great movies, including The Adventures of Baron Munchausen. So until the next video, my friends, stay strong, stay safe, and cheers.